Welcome, welcome, good people. This is Choice Words, brought to you by Freedom to Choose Schools. I'm your host, J. Artist Wright, and you are joining us once again as we are visiting the great state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans. We wanted to take this opportunity this week to interview a lot of people that are in town for different conferences, and it's always good to be able to meet in person with our folks and break bread and be able to touch each other and not, see exactly how tall everyone is in person. But I am joined today by Ken Campbell, very well known, as young as he may look, has had a very strong, powerful leadership history in our space in education, specifically with a focus on representing our underserved communities and Black students. He's also one of my board members, yes. So I feel like I'm kind of interviewing my boss. We'll see how this goes. But I wanted to have some time to speak with you because you've had such a rich history in this space and have worn several hats. And Ken Campbell joins us today to talk about where do we see the future of education going, especially for our Black students, and it's specifically even more siphoned down to Black men. Yeah. So, Ken, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Let our guests know a little bit about you, what you're doing now, and then we'll talk about all the stuff that you've done.
Yeah. So right now I lead growth and strategy for Four Sector Solutions, a private company. And really, as I march towards retirement, for me, like the one thing I was kind of hesitant to keep doing was raising money. Like it's the worst. It's a necessary evil. Like you have to do it. So going to a company that is a for-profit company was a whole different kind of thing for me. But it actually fits very well, and so I'm having fun. We support charter schools around the country, especially Louisiana and New York. So having a good time. I got a great internal piece of work that I do around leadership development and culture. And then I help, figure out the strategy for how our company grows, kind of going forward. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah. I think strategy is probably one of those words that we need to be talking about more often in this space, especially for communities of color and people who are just looking at our current dynamic and feeling like not really knowing how to show up, what to do, are we going to be okay? Things like that require you to start considering strategy. But I want to take a step back a little bit because you, again, like seriously, Ken, you tell me you were in the military in Italy, and I'm thinking like, wait a minute, when was this brother born? Because you got a baby face. Good Lord.
A long time ago.
So tell our listeners and the whole global landscape of what you've been doing. I know foundationally you've always just been a lover of learning. Which so like a lot of my friends, I grew up in Biloxi, Mississippi, and like a lot of us did, I joined the Army right after high school. Spent 8 years on active duty. 4.5 of those years was in Europe, which was great. Spent 1.5 years in Italy, 3 years in Germany, and various places in the U.S. And when I got out of the Army in 1991 and tried to figure out what to do, I kind of fell into this organization that was trying to reform Washington, D.C. public schools. I didn't know a lot about the work. I didn't understand the challenges, especially in urban, school systems we're facing. But I was really, really drawn to this whole idea that business and civic leaders felt like they had to be engaged. They had to partner with the superintendent and school board to try to make it work. And so that was a great experience. And, over time, that kind of moved into a piece around parental choice, right? And giving parents the options to choose where their kids go to school. So it was a fun place to be, helped to, birth the DC charter school movement, in a lot of ways. And so, which is also just as rich as the New Orleans movement.
Absolutely. So, I was there, at the very beginning in DC and kind of loved that. Spent some time doing charters in urban areas across America. Spent 3.5 years in the Middle East setting up charter schools in Qatar, and then came back to Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina to really open a charter school office here and help start charter schools in Louisiana.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you were also part of that wave of the charter school takeover that some people.
Well, I wouldn't really call it a takeover.
I know.
Right?
You know what? Before you even go there, so this is like an outside view, because every time I've met someone from New Orleans and I'm like, so that charter school takeover, they're like, no, that's not how that happened. That's not how that happened. All right, so tell us how it happened.
Well, first of all, so we were in the Middle East when Katrina hit. And growing up in Biloxi, Mississippi, our town was devastated. Our city was completely devastated, the entire Mississippi Gulf Coast. And the effects in New Orleans were just very different because the water set so long and destroyed really a lot of the infrastructure to do schooling. And so while people weren't here, there were people who were here, however, right? People had left, but you needed to have schools and they needed to find a way to open schools. And it just so happened that the Department of Education had some money that was easy to allocate, but it was in the charter school program. And so they were like, look, we can give you money to help restart schools, but they have to be charter schools.
Okay.
And somebody, for whatever reason, said, well, look, y'all need somebody to help do this. And it's this dude, Ken Campbell. He's been over there in the Middle East for 3 years. Like, we need to get him back to the States. And so somebody reach out to him. Let's see if we could get him back to help us do that. And so they recruited me to come back to the States. It really helped to try to make Louisiana, New Orleans in particular, work as far as, kind of charter school policy and getting schools approved. And so it was a phenomenal experience. It was a lot of work, but it was a great experience. And I just think a lot of pride, when you see what exists now. Like Louisiana and DC also. Like I just, like nothing but pride at how those two charter school movements have come together and being a part of them. It's a lot of fun.
One of the things that I'm learning as I hear more about the foundations of how schools were started, just even outside of the charter schools, I think we always go heavy on charters because we're such advocates for it. Yeah. But there's also just this dynamic that we need to talk more about, and that is what you just named, like the rich history of just school choice that didn't just start. Right. It's been around since the beginning, and quality school choice.
Absolutely right. I think what's different and why this is so difficult is for the first time we were talking about allowing poor people, especially poor Black and brown people, to exercise choice, right? Which is something that we didn't have an opportunity to do historically. And so when you started to talk about, hey, we need to allow them to use their public dollars to do this, a lot of backlash, a lot of fighting came to the forefront. But I think it's a righteous fight to be in, right? I just think,
what is the fighting though? Like, what do you think in your
it's always about money. It's always about money. It's always about money.
Yeah.
Money and power and control. Like it's who controls the dollars, right? And who gets to decide how they're spent. And when you start to upset, kind of how the dollars are carved out, it's a problem. It's a real problem. And, dollars are scarce. I mean, I understand that. But, when I was leading BAEO, the Black Alliance for Educational Options, which is a whole nother thing, just the greatest job in the world. But we used to say all the time, and we used to tell people, like, we expect there to be a backlash, but we should, right? Because we're essentially going to them and saying, y'all aren't doing good enough. So this movement is an assertive movement, right? And so we're going in to assert the rights of parents, and that means asserting the rights of them to move money. Right. And so we started this. Right. It's like they didn't start it. We started it. We threw the first punch.
And ultimately, I mean, I guess when you think about it that way, it's hard to be able to come in and say, let me take your money and do a better job than you.
That's essentially what we're saying.
Exactly. However, I mean, we've shown that there's
yes, in many cases we are, right? I think the thing that we have to own, right, are the challenges that our own, kind of educational choice community faces. None of this stuff is perfect. I mean, you have humans, and so there are schools that have failed, absolutely. Hopefully we're doing the right thing and going in and closing those schools down if they aren't serving parents well. We've had people steal money. Hopefully most of them are in jail, where they should be. And so we've just, we have to acknowledge that this work is very hard and that there are no silver bullets. But I do think at the end of the day, allowing parents to choose is one of the most important things that we can do.
Right. I think one of the things that people miss about having the power to choose is the ownership that you get from it, because you feel accountable, like you have a stake in it now.
Absolutely right.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little about BAEO, and it's so funny because Running Freedom to Choose Schools, first of all, it was founded by Dr. Howard Fuller, who also founded BAEO.
Yes.
And I can't tell you, the first 2 years, you know what I'm about to go, like first 2 years is like, oh, is this a new BAEO?
Yeah.
Is this a new BAEO? I honestly, I don't even know if I should say this out loud, because I think every Black person that's in education has had some
touch of BAEO somewhere.
With the exception of me. Like, I did not work in BAEO. I kind of found out about BAEO on the tail end through Dr. Fuller, and shout out to my Jersey folks. But yeah, so tell us about BAEO.
So BAEO, the Black Alliance for Educational Options, was created because we were having a conversation about parental choice in America, but nobody was talking to the families who were going to be most affected. So we felt like we needed an organization that was a Black-led organization that could talk to our parents, right, and represent their interests at the table all the time, as well as, kind of Black people of influence, right? And our job was to, kind of have more people understand how important this was, and at the same time, create new opportunities for Black people to start and develop their own schools and kind of institutions that would endure and do a great job, kind of with our kids. And so, kind of this movement, kind of sprang up, and it was across the country. A lot of energy, a lot of excitement, and I think for the first time, Jay, you mentioned the word strategy earlier, and I do feel like the magic of BAEO was not just that it was Black people, but that our strategy was really solid. We had a very simple thing, right? We did parental choice. We didn't do a whole bunch of other stuff, and so I felt like it was the right mission and the right time. And I think we were able to accomplish so much simply because, we stayed true to who it is we wanted to be. Well,
listen, and I think it is the, birthplace for organizations like mine and BNOLA and Alabama's for Education and like, school board partners with Ethan. Like, there's so many people that are still in this space that literally have grown and developed and nurtured through BAEO that are now running.
And we're probably more proud of that than anything else. One thing that Howard said from the beginning, and a lot of people don't understand it. I was, like, I'm old now, but I was young. But Howard always felt that BAEO had to be intergenerational, right? And I think we're seeing the fruit of that now, right? As younger people, step forward, and you guys take on these organizations and start doing this work. And I think we need to continue to do that, right? And especially, trying to find ways that we could be more aligned. If there's anything I worry about, it is that, as Black people have ascended to, kind of certain positions in education, I think we feel less urgency to organize ourselves at a time where I think we need to organize ourselves more than ever. So that worries me some, but at the end of the day, I think we got a lot of smart people like y'all, and y'all are handling this, and I'm just proud.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. However, I also feel like you just named something that is a value proposition that even in the education system, we don't really give a lot of credit for, and that's that intergenerational relationship, right? Some of the best schools in this country, it's because it's intergenerational.
Yes.
My grandfather went there. My father went there.
Absolutely.
And that same thing is it's true, and it's something that you don't really see weighed as a huge value in academic performance that we should, right? And so that's definitely an area where I want to explore, especially from a policy standpoint. Like, how can we put more weight on the fact that when you're approving a school or when you're starting a school, the impact of having intergenerational families go through that education system? Because, I mean, it truly is. Education is the great equalizer, but it also is how we advance, within our society.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Well, I love that, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, I'm going to have some type of study where we see where everybody went who had some role at BAEO. Where are they now? All right, look, stay tuned. Next season, BAEO, where are they now? I got a whole branch out.
Like I said, it's great that we're still out here, and I think, really those of us who were there at the very beginning are in a place where, we probably have time and energy to help. Like, I'm not trying to run stuff like right now. Like, I don't, I get
Time to pass
calls
the torch,
regularly
yeah.
to do stuff. You know, would you? No,
Yeah.
you know, but like if you got somebody, I'm happy to talk to them and help them, you know, be successful. And I think there are a lot of people like that, and I do think there is value in that. And I think more people should reach out to people who've done stuff, who've, you know, survived in organizations where it was very difficult, who've succeeded, you know, despite, and actually who failed and learned some hard lessons as a part of that.
Yes.
Like, how do we, you know, kind of translate those things down? And again, I just don't think we do that often enough.
We
and,
don't.
You know, too many people take the mantle and it's like, okay, like, where do I
It's
get
just
help?
like, it's all mine.
Here
Yeah.
you go.
You know, it's so funny you say that, because I think that's the reality of where we're finding out even right now with this, with a lot of the voting suppression that we've seen, and just like this challenge to a lot of Black lawmakers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
some sort of way about that, because on one end, I definitely am like, no, we cannot do this.
Yeah.
It's taken us a step back, and we have to be able to hold on to that power. I also feel like, again, using the word strategy, there are several Black lawmakers who have been gatekeeping, and holding on to those districts for years. Without understanding the need of legacy and intergenerational buildup. And now they're threatened. And it's like,
and they don't have any base with the young people out there.
They don't have a base, and they don't have any power.
Yeah.
So they literally, it's just almost like holding on to a rope. You know what I mean? Like as if no one else can.
And I think that's incredibly damaging.
It is. Well, we're seeing it play out.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it play out right now. And so I do think that, you know, the whole idea of there being strength in numbers, and, you know, kind of constantly reaching down and reaching out and listening and understanding, I think we can learn just as much as from young people as they can learn from us.
Absolutely.
And, you know, like when you create spaces where people can listen and learn, and you kind of release the reins and give them more opportunity, like that's what we want. You know, that's what we want. I mean, to me, it's like looking at, you know, my son. I have a 27-year-old, and, you know, I love the man that he has become and is still becoming. And, you know, like when you realize that you don't have to have the steady hand all the time, like it's phenomenal.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to get there.
Yeah, I know, you got ways.
I'm not exactly there yet, but I will tell you though, it definitely, it feels better, you know, again, even I am very much a helicopter mom. So to not have my children with me in summer right now is a challenge, because I'm like, what are y'all doing? But you're right though. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you have to raise a child so they can go off and do well. And we are raising young adults. You know, that whole next generation is important, and it's important for us to do it right.
So I think both the young people as well as just the leaders, like we need fresh new leaders with fresh ideas, and we need to empower them and support them and love on them, you know, as they you know, work their way up.
And it's a two-way street, because I think one thing that I find often is that my kids think they know everything.
Yes, they do.
And so it's like, I'm trying to let you know not to have the same experiences that I've had, but also not limit your experiences. So finding that balance. But let me ask you about that, because again, you've seen the evolution of education, you've seen the evolution of Black leadership in the space. Like you can count towards those staff and those people who started with you in BAEO, who are now leading fantastic organizations of their own. What is the moment for us right now, in your opinion, that as far as Black leadership, where we should be trying to, you know?
So I think there are several things. One, as you know a little bit, Jay, I am a really strong advocate for Christian education. And I do think that there is an opportunity, especially right now, for our Black religious leaders to, you know, kind of step forward on this education piece. I think, you know, kind of coming out of Brown versus Board of Education, I think the Black community kind of relaxed and kind of we turned education over to the government, which I don't think is necessarily bad, but I think there has to be space for something else and something different. And right now, when we find our communities, our institutions, our people under attack, it feels like, you know, kind of that traditional social justice role that our churches played in the past, you know, combined with the importance of like Christian education, feels like, you know, a real opportunity for me. In too many of our communities, I think our kids are, many kids seem to be devoid of hope and love, and I don't know a better, you know, vehicle for teaching hope and love than, you know, than the Bible and what comes out of Christianity. And so that's one. Like I would love to see more of our churches step forward. And that doesn't mean every church should do this. You know, obviously pastors, you know, seek divine guidance in what you're going to do, and not everybody should do it. But like I would love to see us take a stronger stance there, because it's something that, churches are one of the few institutions we have that are ours, and I think that would be important. Second, I continue to be concerned about what's going on with boys and men. In particular, black boys and men. I think across the board, education is rough for boys and men. You typically see scores significantly lower than what you see for girls. And so I think throughout kind of the education realm, just kind of figuring out what are the right interventions there and what are the things we need to do. And I think they need to be boy specific. In a lot of ways, and they are.
I know. How about that, right?
Yeah.
And and I will have to say, and again, this may be a little bit controversial, but I feel like men in general are having a moment right now where, like, regardless of your ethnicity, because quite frankly, women, we're just killing it.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's true, right? So, having been raised by women, married to a wonderful woman, I continue to be impressed by the strides that women have made. And I don't know if other people will agree with me, but I think kind of every education innovation or strategy that we use to try to improve performance, girls pick it up faster. They run with it faster. They run with it farther. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't help boys.
Right.
I just think girls, for whatever reason, seem to be more in tune. And like, how do we not switch that, but how do we turn on, kind of that same dynamic for boys? And I know there's, been increasing, research done and studies done and conversations had. I don't see as much concrete action on that as I would like to see. But, at the end of the day, I do think, the future of our country is going to be dependent upon us making sure that, kind of we're able to level that out. Because it's hard for, a man to, kind of lead a family and have a strong family if, kind of economically and educationally he's not where he needs to be. Right. Like that level of confidence that you need, I think is really important. And so I just feel like it's critical, and it feels like a nationwide problem that at some point we need to solve.
I agree 100%. And like I said, as much as I am all for girl power and women leading, there has to be a balance in everything that we do. And I do not want to be, just in a room. I love being in a room full of women, but it is definitely important that we have a balance there. And I have actually had a couple of conversations. I think I was talking with someone else that was on our show about that. And it's like, how do we do more? And especially in the education space. When we look at the statistics, I think it's like less than 1% of educators are black men. Which is huge. Especially when you compare that to the fact that if a black child, specifically a male child, has at least one educator, that it advances their academic success like exponentially.
Absolutely.
So that is so powerful, and that's a message that we have to keep being consistent.
And it's it's just a broad conversation, we'd have in a lot of ways. I love to see, more men, for example, teaching kindergarten, right? Which is like, every time men come in, one, we want to push them to high school, right? That's the first thing we want to do. We want to push them to leadership as soon as we can before sometimes they become as good as they need to be as far as, instructional leadership. But I feel like that early piece of reading, kind of for boys in particular, having men like teach them and see them and providing that example at an early stage, I feel like there's some power there, and I like to see, now people are I don't like men teaching young kids, we need to get over stuff like that.
That's a different dynamic.
And we need to just have men be educators, and I just think it's an incredibly powerful place for us to have more men. And so I'd love to see it. And like, I applaud the efforts that people are taking to do that. Sharif and the work that he's doing, the folks with Real Men Teach. Like, we have some initiatives, but I just don't feel like they're quite strong enough.
No, well, they're getting there. But again, it's a matter of taking a nuanced approach and telling people you ain't doing a good job. Let me show you how to do it, right? Well, which takes a little while.
There's that, but there's also, Jay, I think the real conversation of who sees this as critical enough to do it, right? And I say
and
that,
pay.
Absolutely,
because the man who's trying to run a household,
exactly. So you got the pay issue, right? But then you also have the who's going to prepare men for this, kind of issue. I think the philanthropic community has been funding reform stuff for so long, and I think things that feel less exciting for them. Like over time, they're like,
Yeah.
So, how much are they going to continue to invest in talent strategies?
Right.
I don't know, but I'd love to see an investment in particular in that strategy, even if they don't fund others. That feels like it's important.
Well, I often tell people that, Black communities are always on the verge of reinventing something and doing something new, especially when we come across adversity.
Yeah.
So if it's not there, it's on its way,
Yeah.
and there will always be someone who will show some level of interest,
Yes.
or will do it, and then somebody will catch on to it and say we should, do the same thing.
Absolutely.
So I'm not worried about that at all. It's been so great to talk to you, especially in person, because that's another thing, just like that connection, the human connection that is somehow getting watered down because of technology, which and it's one of those things. Even we could go on a whole conversation about AI, but human connectivity will always be important, and I feel it. Your energy, your power. So I thank you so much for sitting down with me in New Orleans in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Jay, thank you for what you do.
Thank
you. Like it's again, like I know like the challenges that are inherent with running an organization. Kind of the easiest part of it that feels probably hardest is I got to corral board members. Like that's the easy part. Like
well, y'all make it
it's
easy
all the stuff out there. And I think I hope that kind of one as a board that we'll continue to support you the way that you need to be supported, and that we have the kind of impact that I think the organization is already having and could have even more. So I just think it's an exciting time. I'm really glad that you're doing what you're doing. That freedom to choose is here. And carrying on, I just think some important work that was started a long time ago. So, I think it's a great place to be.
I've accepted the baton and I'm running my leg of the race as fast as I possibly, not as fast, as great as I possibly can, because this is definitely a marathon. It is not a sprint. Well, Ken, before we close out, we always ask our guests if you had some choice words to share with our listeners. And I think you already started it, but I'm not going to take your words for you. But what would you want our listeners to know? What are some choice words you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, God. Honestly, I think we have to love the potential of our kids as much as we love ourselves. And I just think, too often we don't do that. And that frightens me. It's one of the few things that frighten me. And I think that's increasing in America. But give our kids more options, like make the world rich for them. We're in an exciting time with technology and AI and all those different things. We got to think about the future of the children.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening to another episode of Choice Words with Freedom to Choose Schools. And until next time, have a great day.